Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Austin Alves, and I'm going to be interviewing people to learn about different careers and how to live a meaningful and fulfilling life. In this video, I'm going to be interviewing Mr. Frank Berry, a retired teacher and former veteran from the Vietnam War. Please enjoy. Could you do a little introduction of yourself for the video? Just talk about who you are, a little bit of your background.
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, let me go back to where I'm not originally from California. I'm actually from the East Coast. I'm from a city a little north of Boston called Lowell, Massachusetts. And the claim to fame to Lowell is that we have a famous writer from the 50s that was from there. His name is Jack Kerouac. If you ever look up, he had a best-selling book called On the Road, which is about the 50s hippie generation. So that's my town's claim to fame. But it's also was if you look in the history books, you'll find that Lowell was a major textile city. A lot of the textile industry in the 50s was in New England. And I was born there in Lowell. But my father was a weaver. And what happened in the 50s is that the textile industry all moved south. So my father father and mother packed the five of us in the back of a car, and we drove down to South Carolina, and that's where all the textile went. So he went where the work was. So we went down to South Carolina. I lived in the Carolinas for 10 years. It was in the Carolinas that first of all, I'll tell you my ethnicity. I'm Irish Catholic. And when you have big families in Irish Catholic, one of them usually aspires to being a religious. So when I was in South Carolina, I went to a Catholic school. I joined Catholic youth organizations. I was an altar boy. So the nuns and priests said, you're a very great candidate for the priesthood. So they recommended me, and ended up because the diocese in South Carolina is out of Charleston. They send all their seminarians to Ohio. There is a seminary in Ohio called the Pontifical College Josephinum. It is under the auspices of Rome. So when we wore our black cassocks, we had red sashes, we had red trimming, we had red buttons because we were under the auspices of Rome. So I spent 6 years there. And the reason I bring this up is that I didn't know then how it was going to affect my life, especially in the military, which I'll get to. But so I spent 6 years in the seminary. And in my second year of college, I decided, you know what? I went in when I was 14. I had no idea what life was about. So I said, you know what? I need to get out, find out what life is about. And if I still want to take the vow to be a priest, I can come back. So I got out. By then, my parents had moved back to Massachusetts. So I went back to Massachusetts. And because it was now 1965, the Vietnam War was heating up. And I knew because I was not in college, I was actually working to help my family. I knew I was going to get drafted. So I went down to the Navy recruiter because my father was in the Navy in the World War II. And they had a waiting list for a year. Everybody wanted to get in the Navy. Nobody wanted to go in the Army because that's where everybody went for Vietnam. So my second choice was Air Force because I had two uncles in the Air Force. So the Air Force accepted me. I did my basic training in Lackland Air Force Base in Texas for 6 weeks. They originally signed me up to be an engineer. I don't know why, but I thought that was a skill. Maybe that would be a good skill when I got out. But a funny thing happened on my way to engineering. They gave me a test and found out I had an aptitude for languages. So when I got my orders at Lackland, it says you're to report to Monterey, California, to the Defense Language Institute for the study of Bahasa Indonesian language training. Now I had no idea. I didn't even know where Indonesia was. I had to go look it up in the library and find out where the heck Indonesia was. And Bahasa is the actual Indonesian word for language, so Indonesian language.
Oh.
Uh, Now, is this too much detail or I should keep going?
No, you can keep going. This is fine.
Okay. Um, so we spent 36 weeks in Monterey studying Indonesian language. We learned about the culture. We learned even how to cook the food.
Mhm.
And we had all the instructors in Monterey, no matter what you're taking, are native speakers. So we came out of there. There was only 6 of us. We came out of there very fluent in the language. But the problem was there was no need for us at the end because in 1965 and 66 was a communist uprising in Indonesia, and President Sukarno shot them all. So there was no need for us. So we went to Texas, and they said, "How would you like another language and a guaranteed assignment to Japan?" So we said, "Sure, why not?" I didn't want to spend my last couple of years in the Air Force in Texas doing nothing. So we found out the language they were going to teach us was Vietnamese. So they sent us to Washington. So we're all very skeptical. Yeah, we're going to Japan. Yeah, right. Vietnam. Yeah, here we go. But we actually did go to Japan because what we were airborne linguists. We were flying out of Japan down to Vietnam, spend 8 hours on orbit in the Gulf of Tonkin, listening in to the North Vietnamese. I was listening into the Air Force. So 6 months after I got to Japan, they moved the whole unit down to Okinawa because the war was heating up, and we were a little bit closer. And then we actually ended up every 30 days going to Da Nang in Vietnam because in Da Nang they flew the day missions or the night missions, and out of Okinawa we flew the day missions. So I got to go to Da Nang 30 days at a time over the course of a year and a half. Uh, and that language training came in handy because the North Vietnamese trying to shoot us down, and I heard them and actually saved our plane. So that was the highlight of my. So at the end of my 4 years, it was either uh, go back to school, which I wasn't ready for yet, or they offered me another language and a guaranteed assignment to Athens, Greece. So you can imagine being a fan of history. I thought, well, Athens, Greece, the cradle of civilization. So we did. The language they sent us to Washington for was Hebrew, which is, as you may know, the language of Israel. So I spent 2.5 years in Athens, Greece. So it was the best time in my life. I mean, Greece was just an incredible country. We were not allowed. We didn't have a military base. So we got to live in our own homes and apartments. No uniforms because we were supposed to be not there. We would only put a uniform on when we get on the plane. So after those 4 years, I had spent 8 years in the Air Force. I knew it was time to make a decision. My decision was to go back to school, finish my degree, and I went to the University of Massachusetts in Boston because UMass Boston gives its veterans free tuition, books, and a stipend and a job. I actually had a job working the vice president's office. I went, finished my degree, got my teaching credential. I started teaching around Boston. And then the blizzard of 1978 came. That's when I had to dig my car out of snow for 5 days. I said, "I'm heck with this. I'm going to California."
Mm-hmm.
So I put everything in my car, drove to California, arrived in 1980. And because I was looking for a teaching job, it wasn't school time yet. I got a part-time job as a security guard at CBS Television City, where they film the soap operas and they filmed a lot of the shows. So I did get a teaching job in East LA, a Catholic boys' school called Salesian High School. I had never eaten a taco in my life or a burrito. I got introduced to the culture, fell in love with the culture, and just loved it there. Over the next course of about 30 years, my teaching involved teaching high school, then business English, English as a second language, vocational English, then workplace English. I would go into companies and teach the employees English. Many of them were Hispanic or Vietnamese, and I knew both languages. So it was sort of nice, but of course, I couldn't let them speak that language because I was teaching them English. But anyway, so after 40 years of teaching and everything, I retired, and now what I basically do is volunteer. I volunteer for two Kiwanis clubs. I volunteer for the Vietnam veterans, and I volunteer for the Vietnamese Heritage Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what else. I know there's something else I'm missing. What is it? I'll think of it. But anyway, so now after retiring, that's what I actually do now is just volunteer. So
Mm-hmm.
that brings you up to date.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yep. Very nice, interesting, and long story. Yeah. So just to recap, to summarize it really quickly. So, when you were young, you went through the Irish and the Catholic kind of system, and they were going to consider you to be a priest, but then you decided to sort of get out, and then you went into the Air Force, where you learned Indonesian, and then Vietnamese, and then Hebrew.
Correct.
And then you went back to school, got your teaching credentials, moved to California, and then taught for like 30 years. And now you are volunteering at many different places.
Hmm. Yeah, and being a teacher, that's why Kiwanis appealed to me because I got to continue mentoring and working with youth as I did as a teacher. So I think that's why Kiwanis has so many teachers because they get to continue what they're doing after they retire.
Mm-hmm. During this whole time, like when you were going from like place to place in the Navy, or even when you got out and decided to finish your degree, get your teaching credentials, did you ever, at any point in time, were you ever like thinking about the long run? Oh, what am I gonna do after this? Or did you just keep on, going, like whatever they said? Oh, there's another language you can learn, and then you just followed. Or did you think about, um did you really think or ponder about like your life's direction at that point? Or
Yeah, well, it's interesting you asked that because I didn't tell you what I got my degree in. I got my degree in English, but I also got it in theater.
oh.
And my parents and my brothers and my sister, what are you going to do with theater? Come on,
Mm-hmm.
unless you want to be an actor or something else. But
Mm-hmm.
what I found was theater actually was the best preparation I could have had to being a teacher. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, a teacher's on stage. When you're in front of a classroom, you're on stage. And
Mm-hmm.
all the things I learned in theater about emoting, about gestures, about speaking, and everything else helped me as a teacher. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, little did I know it then, but now as I look back, I understand that it really did help me a lot in the teaching profession. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I also noticed that throughout your life you have a sort of theme of service, whether it be through, in the Navy for our country, teaching people,
Yep.
when you're a teacher, or even now as you're volunteering as a Kawanian, as well as to other organizations. Um, why does service mean so much to you?
Well, it's interesting because someone would ask me about you didn't become a priest. I said, no, you do not have to wear a collar to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the values of service that I learned in the seminary, because that's what priests do. That's what priests do. They serve. They
Mm-hmm.
serve their parishes. They serve their community. I think all those things I learned in the seminary actually helped prepare me, and also it brought home to me how would I say not only exhilarating but fulfilling it is when you help someone. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we sometimes don't always see the results of the people we help.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, when key clubbers come back and thank me and haven't seen for 10 years and they still remember my name, so oh, Mr. Barry, good to see you again. I mean, it's such a rush because you
Mm-hmm.
realize that you left an impression, you made an impression on them,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and that's why I wrote the four books that I wrote because I wanted to leave a legacy of the lesson that I learned in my life. So.
Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit more about the books that you just mentioned?
Yeah, I saw them as a quartet, as a four-book series that
Mhm,
covered four major aspects of my life, and I called it the Seeds Quartet because where the seeds were planted in each part. So the first one is called the Seminary Seeds, and it's about my 6 years in the Catholic seminary and all the lessons I learned there. And then I move on to the Military Seeds, which is about my 8 years in the U.S. Air Force. And then I get into the Education Seeds, which is my close to 40 years of teaching. And then the final book is called The Service Siege, which is my last 15 years of volunteering. So I wanted to leave my family, my nieces and nephews, and everyone that I work with, and other people that, like yourselves, I've given a lot of the books out to Key Clubbers and everything else, in
mhm,
Kiwanis clubs. What are the things that I learned that possibly could help somebody else?
mhm. If you could summarize sort of each of those phases of your life, so from um um so you had your a church, you had the military, you had teaching, and now service. If you could say take like one, like the most important lesson that you've had from each phase of your life, what would it be? Starting with um
Wow. For each one, you mean?
mhm,
Well, for the seminary, it would be basically that when you do something for someone else, it all comes back to you. I'm a great believer. There's a saying that what you put out will return. So that what the positive that you put out will also bring back the positive to you. Some religions call it karma,
mhm,
and but that's the main lesson I learned when I was a seminary, that the good that you do will come back in some way.
mhm,
Uh, as far as the military, I think it had to do with team working as a team,
mhm,
because in the military you had to depend on those around you. We don't call each other brother for nothing because we're like a family.
mhm,
We had to watch each other's backs. When I was flying, I had to make sure to listen in very carefully because I didn't want us to be threatened. So to me, it was about teamwork, how important the importance of teamwork. In any organization, teamwork today is such a big thing with most organizations finally realizing that when you work as a team, everybody working together for a common good, you're
mhm,
going to achieve much, much more.
mhm,
Um, in my teaching, I think the lesson was that you can never stop learning. Uh,
mhm,
that I taught different subjects, everything from English, mainly mostly English, but also I learned, especially working with so many different cultures and different people from different countries. I learned as much as they learned from me in many ways. So for me, that's a big lesson that you don't stop learning, keep learning, keep your mind active, and that's even more important as you get older, of course. Uh, but as far as volunteering is concerned, it goes back to the values I learned in the seminary, that uh, what what you put out to the community and
mhm,
to helping other people will come back to you. So volunteering, as a matter of fact, in my book on service, I talk about the health effects that volunteering has on people.
mhm,
That it's not only fulfilling for you personally, it's also healthy,
mhm,
because you're out there doing good, and that for not only for your spirit, but also your doctors have found out that people that do volunteer and give of their time live longer,
mhm,
and many times have less problems. So
mhm. A question about that. Um, do you think the idea of um volunteering or what you put out comes back to you, right? Do you think that there's a difference because I feel like or I there might be a possibility that people take that and then they see volunteering as a way to get something out of it instead of doing it out of their own a selflessness, is there a difference between like volunteering because you enjoy helping others versus volunteering because you expect some kindness or some favor to come in return to yourself?
I do. And I think as an example, I know that I think it's the Anaheim Unified School District requires 50 hours of volunteering for graduation. So I'm
Mhm,
sure there's people out there that who would not want to volunteer, but do because they need the 50 hours. And I don't think they get out of the experience what they could have had they gone in without that motive.
mhm,
Because if you have no motive except to put yourself out there and help people, it's
mhm,
much, to me, it's much more fulfilling than if you're forced to do something.
mhm,
Like someone saying, putting a gun to you, and you got to go out there and do those 50 hours or else. Well, they're going to resent that for one thing.
mhm,
They're not going to probably not enjoy it and get not hardly anything out of it. So I think you're right. There's a big difference
mm.
between doing it for self fulfillment rather than out of a necessity or having to do it.
Do you think then in that case that school districts or schools shouldn't have to have a requirement of community service hours in order to graduate? They should just get rid of that entirely?
Overall, no, I don't think so. I think some people would never volunteer to do something. I think whether they want to admit it or not. For instance, if they join a key club and get in some kind of a service project, it's gonna affect them in some way,
Mhm,
even if they're not open to it that much. But they're gonna see the experience itself. I think is important. Uh,
mhm,
it goes back to uh, John Kennedy said it very succinctly. I'm from Massachusetts, and he was from Massachusetts. He said, "Ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you." And not, no, is that right? Yeah,
that'd
that's
be
not
the
what
way
you,
around.
yeah,
Ask not what your
not
country
what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And it's the same way for your community.
Mm,
I think even though some of them may not appreciate it, I think they still will get something out of it. So I wouldn't do away with it.
mhm. What is to sum up your whole life in it's difficult, but to sum up your whole life in, say, a word, what is the most important thing to you? It can be like a value, a person, an object. What is one thing that has a special importance in your heart?
Boy, let me think about that one for a second. Um,
Take your time.
uh, I would say if I could sum it in one little phrase would be self-fulfillment.
Mhm,
Uh, Basically feeling that you have done something to make an impact on the world.
mhm,
So you've fulfilled your sort of like your the meaning of life. People talk about what is the meaning of life. Uh, and it's somehow if you can come to that realization at the end of your life that you've left something behind or left the world better than it was, I
mhm,
think that's important.
mhm. S Wow. So, the one you would say legacy or what impact you have.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's important.
Because the meaning of life to different people can mean different things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm. So, let me tell you about one personal philosophy that obviously I'm always changing, but something that I thought of in what I'm doing right now as a student working to, you know, get into a good college eventually, um,
Hmm.
is that I want to live my life in a way that when I'm like on my deathbed, then I think, oh, I have no regrets. I want to do everything in a way that my future self won't regret what I did in the past. So whether that mean trying new things out or, you know, because a part of me, a lot of people, the way that it's portrayed now is that you can have like the money making lifestyle where people, work really hard, go to Wall Street or whatever. The very popularized sort of lifestyle is either that or you enjoy yourself in, but then the way that it's popularized is that enjoying yourself, it comes with some financial struggle. So I'm trying to, find or think of a way that I can get the best of both worlds without making it so that I regret doing it in the past. So this
Hmm.
leads me to my final question for you, which is what is your biggest regret in life so
And I
far?
have your questions here, and I saw that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what I wrote down when I was looking at this is that I don't think in terms of any regret because I'm a great believer that things in life happen for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And to illustrate what my life, there was a reason I left the seminary. There was a reason I got in the Air Force. There's
Mm-hmm.
a reason I got out of the Air Force when I did and went back to college. There's
Mm-hmm.
a reason I got the degree I got and the teaching credential. And all through my life, things that happened uh, always led me to something better or greater, if
Mm-hmm.
you understand what I'm saying. So when somebody said, "Do you regret anything?" No, not really. I could regret that I didn't stay in and become a priest. But as I said, you don't need a collar to help people. I don't have to be an ordained priest to help everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't think I have any regrets at all, actually.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the my whole thinking is wrong. Maybe I shouldn't think of in terms of regrets, but instead of what each phase or what each point in life can bring that's better or new or greater to.
Yeah, and there's something also people refer to as missed opportunities.
Mhm.
Somebody might say, "Oh, there would have been an opportunity here and I didn't take it." Well, not that I regret it, but who knows what would have happened if I had taken that opportunity. But I
Mm,
think you're right in that to be open, to open the opportunity. That's the big thing.
mhm.
To make yourself open
Mhm.
because things will happen if you open yourself to opportunities. Things are going to happen.
Mhm. Yep. Well, that just about concludes our interview. It's about the meeting will end in 10 minutes and we've been here for about half an hour. So thank you so much for doing this, Mr. Barry.
You're
Really
welcome.
appreciate it.